Okay, so let's talk dopamine. If you've ever found yourself just hitting refresh on your email again and again, or maybe scrolling through endless short videos, or, needing that third coffee just to get going, well, you've definitely felt the pull of dopamine. We're diving into this really famous neurochemical today. People call it the feel-good molecule all the time.
Right. And that's the first thing we kind of need to tackle, that feel-good label.
Yeah.
Because yes, dopamine is involved in feeling satisfied, sure. But the research we looked at, it really points to something else being central. It's less about the pleasure of the reward itself, the liking part. It's much, much more about the drive, the seeking, the anticipation, the wanting that pushes you. It's basically the chemical of pursuit.
That's exactly what we want to unpack today, to really get into this engine of motivation. So we'll define it clearly, look at how it powers that wanting system you mentioned, explore its role, and it's a big one, in some serious health conditions. And then, importantly, we'll get into some practical, natural ways to, keep your dopamine system working well based on the source materials.
Okay, so starting simple. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. Think of it like a chemical messenger, right? Mm-hmm. It sends signals between your brain cells, your neurons, and it's absolutely key to the brain's reward system. It helps with motivation, attention, mood, but also regulates really fundamental things like how you move, how you learn, even emotional responses.
Got it. So if the feeling of pleasure is like the destination, dopamine is the engine, the gas pedal, pushing us to get there. Let's dive deeper into that idea then, the engine of desire. If it's all about the pursuit, what does that actually look like?
Well, it means dopamine kind of ramps everything up. Increases your general arousal level, makes you more focused on goals. It's also what makes us curious, that urge to find out new information, constantly scanning for potential rewards. That's dopamine. And the reward could be anything, food, obviously, but also just a new idea, a piece of information.
Right. There's that classic lab example you hear about, the rat pressing a lever over and over for food pellet because of the dopamine hit, repetitive, driven behavior. But how does that loop, that sort of compulsive action, show up in, our complex human lives today?
Oh, it translates directly, very directly into what the sources call modern reward-seeking loops.
Yeah.
The mechanism is basically the same, whether you're talking about addictive drugs or certain foods, think super sugary or fatty things, or even just the notification light blinking on your phone.
Yeah.
Dopamine is driving that anticipation, that feeling of, maybe there's something good here.
Yeah.
So when you feel that pull to check Instagram again, even though you just looked, that's the anticipation, the wanting system firing up and reinforcing that loop.
And the stronger that feeling of anticipation, the deeper the brain carves that pathway, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dopamine reward circuit essentially flags any intense experience. Could be excitement, could be an actual drug high, is important, really important. It creates strong memories linked to whatever triggered it, the cues. It physically changes the brain at a cellular level. And its main message is, repeat that behavior, that was good, do it again. It's a survival mechanism, really powerful, just sort of repurposed for all these modern triggers.
Wow. Okay, so knowing it's that powerful, we really need to understand what happens when levels are too high or too low. I was really struck by how the sources describe someone with a high dopamine profile. The sensation seeker.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. You might think sensation seeker, okay, that means risky behavior, and sometimes it can. But the major upside the research highlights is resilience. People with naturally higher dopamine levels tend to see stressful situations not as overwhelming threats, but more as challenges to tackle and overcome.
And that makes a huge difference psychologically, I imagine, that perspective shift. It's like a built-in buffer against chronic stress. Sounds like high dopamine folks are almost pre-wired for being more hardy in the long run.
It seems that way, yeah. But then you look at the flip side, the low levels, and that's where you see real vulnerability emerge, especially if we connect this back to addiction. The sources suggest that people starting with a lower baseline dopamine level, or maybe fewer active receptors, they're at a significant disadvantage.
How does that work exactly? Why would having less dopamine make someone need bigger and bigger hits of stimulation?
Well, the thinking is if your natural starting point is lower, maybe due to genetics, chronic stress, whatever, your system isn't getting enough signal, basically. So you need a much bigger external jolt, a much stronger input, just to get back to a feeling of normal, let alone pleasure. And that can drive the need for higher doses, more extreme behaviors. Seeking that satisfaction, not because they feel more pleasure initially, but because they're trying to overcome this fundamental deficit.
That really reframes addiction, doesn't it? Less about pure hedonism, more about trying to normalize a chemical imbalance. Which brings us right into the really serious health connections, dopamine and major diseases.
Yeah, and here we absolutely have to mention the groundwork laid by Arvid Carlsson. He won a Nobel Prize for figuring out dopamine's crucial role in the motor system. That discovery was key to understanding Parkinson's disease.
Okay, so what's the specific link there? What happens in Parkinson's?
In Parkinson's, the brain cells that produce dopamine, especially in a specific area called the substantia nigra, which controls movement, start to die off. So you don't have enough dopamine to properly regulate movement. That leads to the symptoms everyone recognizes, the tremors you can't control, muscle stiffness or rigidity, really slowed down movement. They call it bradykinesia, and eventually changes in walking and speech too.
And the main treatment being L-Dopa really highlights how central dopamine is to just moving your body.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
L-Dopa is basically a precursor molecule. The brain can take it and convert it into dopamine. It helps bypass the damaged cells, restoring some of that chemical signaling needed for movement. It really shows movement isn't just muscles, it's complex brain chemistry.
And beyond movement, the sources talked about dopamine in really complex psychiatric conditions too, like schizophrenia and substance abuse. That seems trickier than just too little or too much.
It is definitely more complex. It's not always a simple deficiency. With schizophrenia, for instance, one leading theory, the dopamine hypothesis, suggests it's actually an overactivity of dopamine in certain brain pathways. This overactivity might contribute to what they call the positive symptoms.
Positive meaning things added to normal experience, like hallucinations or delusions.
Exactly. And then with substance abuse disorder, it's often not a deficiency to begin with. It's the drug causing this massive unnatural flood of dopamine. The brain, trying to protect itself and get back to balance, starts to dial down its own dopamine production and even reduces the number of available receptors. And that leads to tolerance needing more drug for the same effect and the dependency we talked about. The brain is trying to adapt, but it creates a bigger problem.
Okay, let's shift slightly. A connection many listeners might know is ADHD. Treatments often involve medications that boost dopamine effectiveness, helping with focus.
Yes, that's a really important application. By making the dopamine that is there work more effectively, or by increasing its levels slightly, these medications can help patients filter out distractions and concentrate better. But, and this is a crucial point, the sources were clear on, we have to be upfront about what we don't know. Exactly how having more effective dopamine translates so specifically into that improved laser-like focus. Well, the neuroscience isn't fully understood yet.
That's quite humbling, actually. A reminder of how much more there is to learn about the brain. But it's clear this one chemical is just woven into everything. Movement, focus, motivation. What other conditions are linked to dopamine deficiency?
Oh, the list is pretty long. Deficiencies are implicated in cognitive problems, like those seen in Alzheimer's disease, also in many types of depressive disorders, and in impulse control issues, think binge eating disorder or gambling addiction. And it's critical right from the start of life. Not having enough dopamine during key developmental periods in infancy, for example, in conditions like congenital hypothyroidism, can lead to severe developmental disabilities.
Wow. Okay, so given it's tied into everything from our fine motor skills to our ability to focus and our resilience, optimizing our natural dopamine seems like a pretty major health goal. Let's get practical then. Let's talk about natural ways to support the system. Where do we start?
The research really hammers this home. The absolute foundation is good old-fashioned self-care. And number one on that list, sleep. It's easy to underestimate, but just one night of really bad, broken sleep can tank your dopamine availability the next day. You can feel it, right? So proper sleep hygiene, consistent schedule, dark room, winding down, it's not optional. That's when your brain does its crucial repair and refueling work for neurotransmitters.
Makes sense. Sleep first. What else on a daily basis helps support the dopamine system?
Regular, moderate exercise is huge. It helps promote the healthy creation, the synthesis of neurotransmitters like dopamine. It doesn't have to be marathon running, just consistent movement. And maybe the biggest one for modern life, managing stress proactively. Chronic stress is just corrosive. Things like meditation, deep breathing exercises, even simple visualization. These aren't just nice to haves. They're essential tools to avoid those long periods of high cortisol that really mess with dopamine regulation.
Okay, let's talk building blocks. Dopamine has to be made from something we eat, right?
That's right. The body makes dopamine from an amino acid called L-tyrosine. So the goal is pretty straightforward. Eat foods rich in tyrosine. And luckily, the list includes lots of common foods. Good quality proteins like cheese, meat, fish, dairy are great sources, but also plenty of plant-based options. Soy products, seeds, nuts, beans, lentils. The sources generally suggest getting it from food is better than relying only on supplements if possible.
Are there other nutrients involved, things that help the process along?
Yes, definitely. Magnesium is really important. It acts as a cofactor in many enzyme processes in the body, including the ones that convert tyrosine into dopamine. So think about foods rich in magnesium. Seeds, again, nuts, soy, beans, whole grains. And just as important as what you add is what you subtract, at least minimize. Heavily processed foods, really high-fat meals, tons of sugar, relying too much on caffeine. These tend to cause big spikes and then crashes in energy and mood, which can destabilize your dopamine system over time.
We should probably briefly mention natural nootropics too, since that's something a lot of our listeners are interested in exploring.
Sure. If supplementation is something you're considering, the sources point towards things like L-tyrosine itself, the precursor we just talked about, and also L-theanine, which is found in green tea. It tends to promote a sort of calm alertness, maybe without the jitteriness caffeine can cause for some people.
Yeah.
These can offer some targeted support, particularly if you're going through a period of high mental demand.
So putting it all together, it's kind of amazing, isn't it, how this one single molecule connects our ability to resist impulses, our drive to learn new things, our basic ability to move smoothly, and even our vulnerability to things like addiction. It really is the master molecule of motivation, just constantly pushing us forward.
It absolutely is. It's the chemical that makes us curious, makes us want novelty, makes us put in the effort. It drives incredible human achievements like scientific discovery, the quest for knowledge. But it's the same system that can get hijacked by, the compulsive loops of the modern world.
Yeah. And speaking of that drive for novelty, let's end with this final thought, something to chew on based on that research. The study suggested that if you're constantly exposed to really intense, say, romantic excitement, the dopamine system can actually get a bit dulled to it. It adapts, and then the brain starts craving something new, something different, just to get that same level of high again. Now, if that's potentially true for something as complex as relationships, what does that principle mean for our everyday lives? With our constant search for tiny hits of novel, low-effort stimulation, the endless scrolling, the instant notifications, are we maybe unintentionally burning out our own pursuit systems, making it harder to find motivation for genuine long-term goals because they don't offer that immediate, easy hit?
That's definitely something worth thinking about as you go about seeking your next challenge. Thanks everyone for joining us for this deep dive.